Discipline is first, of course. After that, if you have the passion and curiosity, you try to be motivated and to learn. Learning every day.
This is really the most important process to learn.
As you learn more and more, you realize the total interconnectivity of everything in our world.
The fact that you can describe nature with mathematics is a huge thing. And the fact that you can actually understand it is wonderful.
To understand how nature works, and then to use that understanding to create something new.
It takes years to get, to make progress. You can't be frustrated by failure. You've got to realize that's what it's all about.
It's not the time to give up. It's the time to get encouraged and try to see what you can do that might change the world.
Please welcome our Master of Ceremonies, the Franklin Institute's Chief Astronomer, Derek Pitts.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Franklin Institute Awards Ceremony. And it's an honor to serve as your Master of Ceremonies as we celebrate the visionary work of this year's laureates. We're thrilled to be here in person for the first time since 2019. The last time I served in this role 1 year ago, I was speaking to an empty room and only a masked production crew. And many of you were watching from your living rooms. But science brings us together. It's what we celebrate tonight, and it's why we can be here in person again. Tonight we'll meet 13 exceptional individuals and learn about their achievements that have expanded our understanding of the universe, connected people across the globe, and most certainly saved lives. Each has left an indelible mark on the world with advancements in science, technology, and industry that have transformed our lives as we know them and which lay the groundwork for our future. It is our privilege to be in their presence this evening. On behalf of all of us here at the Franklin Institute, I thank you for being here tonight and offer our heartfelt congratulations to our laureates as they join the likes of Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Marie Curie, Nikola Tesla, Jane Goodall, and many, many more in an exclusive community of scientists, engineers, inventors, and business leaders dating back 198 years. It's now my pleasure to introduce the chair of the Franklin Institute Board of Trustees, Don Morell, and the Franklin Institute President and CEO, Larry Dubinsky. Now, let's welcome the 2022 Franklin Institute laureates, escorted by their sponsors.
Albert Bourla and Alex Gorski, escorted by sponsor Michael Usain. Catalin Carrico and Drew Weissman, escorted by sponsors Brad Jameson and Alan Nicholson. Carol V. Robinson, escorted by sponsor Sharon Rozovsky. Sheldon Weinbaum, escorted by sponsor Jerry Jones. P. Daniel Dapkis and Russell D. Dupuis, escorted by sponsor Baram Nabet. Paul Slovic, escorted by sponsor Sharon Thompson Schill. Sally Chisholm, escorted by sponsor Helen White. Representing Edward C. Stone, Janet Stone, escorted by Daryl Williams on behalf of sponsor Tom Geiser. Kafui Dzirasa, escorted by sponsor Maya Buchin.
Good evening. We are thrilled to be here with all of you, paying tribute to America's first great scientist, Benjamin Franklin, by honoring the greatest minds in science, engineering, and industry today.
Like so many of you gathered here tonight, we believe in the Institute's mission to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology. Thank you for joining us to celebrate our 13 laureates and their groundbreaking work, which has shaped our present and will inform our future.
On behalf of our 2022 Vice Chairs, Greg Devins and Heather Bittenbender, and the Awards Corporate Committee and Friends Committee, we thank everyone for their presence and support.
The proceeds from this evening help make possible the important work the Institute does in this museum every day. The work of inspiring and educating another generation of STEM leaders and informed citizens.
Without question, tonight would not be possible without Bank of America, the presenting sponsor of the award ceremony for a remarkable 20 years. Thank you.
I'd like to extend a special thanks to our associate sponsors this evening: the Danaher Lynch Family Foundation, Deloitte LLP, Essential Utilities, Johnson & Johnson, the Samuel P. Mandel Foundation, the Morrell Family Foundation, Morgan Lewis, PICO, Marcia and Jeffrey Perlman, and Pfizer.
And thank you to our award patron sponsors, including Haley and David Edelman, Brown Brothers Harriman, the Boeing Company, Comcast NBC Universal, the Dow Chemical Company, Eckert Siemens Charon and Mellett, First Trust Bank, FS Investments, HM Health Solutions, Independence Blue Cross, Penn Medicine, the Sattel Family Foundation, Utility Line Services, and West Pharmaceutical Services. A full list of individual and corporate supporters can be found in your ceremony program.
Whether this is your first Franklin Institute Award ceremony or your 10th, we know that you will leave here inspired and grateful for the lifetime of work to which our laureates have dedicated themselves. Laureates, we congratulate and applaud you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the program.
We're grateful to Melissa and Mike and the Friends and Awards corporate committees for their volunteerism and leadership. Now, before I begin introducing this year's class of laureates, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our 2021 laureates, who we honored virtually last year, but were not able to celebrate with us in person. We're delighted to have 2021 laureates Jeremy Nathans and Barbara Partee with us this evening. We're thrilled you can be with us along with all Society of Laureates members who've joined us tonight. And now we turn our attention to tonight's guests of honor. We begin with the Benjamin Franklin Next Gen Award which debuted in 2021 to recognize an investigator in the early phase of their career. This award commends the intellectual leadership of an exceptional discovery or invention, or innovative development in science or engineering. With this award, the Franklin Institute has even greater opportunity to honor achievements that are recent, relevant, and cutting edge. With a passion for science fiction, Kafui Dzirasa is boldly doing what few have done before. Uniting artificial intelligence with neural interfaces, he's mapping one of the greatest remaining frontiers in biology, the human brain. And he sees a future in which advanced technology revolutionizes psychiatric care.
The human brain, an infinitely complex web of cellular connections choreographing an intricate dance of chemical and electrical signals that shape and are shaped by our conscious experience, mind from matter. If that sounds philosophical to you, well, it is. But for the millions who suffer from depression, it is also the foundation of a revolutionary new science combining medicine, brain-computer interfaces, machine learning, and Kafui Dzirasa's unshakable resolve to find a cure.
Like all of us, I'm a huge fan of Marvel movies. I am a huge fan of Kung Fu movies, which I grew up off of. I watch a lot of science fiction movies now.
And were Dzirasa's career a movie, the opening act would have its own sci-fi twist. University of Maryland, Baltimore County engineering undergraduate Kafui Dzirasa quits a future in the fuel industry to search for a new purpose. He reads about a monkey trained to control a robotic arm through a machine that reads its thoughts. The sun comes out. This groundbreaking true-to-life research undertaken at Duke University in 1998 introduced Dzirasa to brain-machine interfaces, whereby computers interact electrically with neurons.
I just wanted to be an engineer and make body parts and hook them up to the brain and cure everybody who was paralyzed.
Following this new dream, Dzirasa became the first African-American student to receive a PhD in neurobiology from Duke before he continued on to earn an MD PhD in psychiatry. Ultimately, Dzirasa's dream would evolve after a close experience with two patients suffering from severe depression, one with insomnia and weight loss, the other sleeping excessively and gaining weight.
I never forget how disjoint that was for me as an engineer, because they had no overlapping symptoms whatsoever, and yet we diagnosed it the same illness.
Dzirasa viewed the problem electrically, guessing that different electrical problems in the brain will each result in depression, just as hearing different minor chords on the piano can evoke a similar emotional response. It would explain why treatment with current medications can take months of trial and error. Dzirasa wondered whether a brain-machine interface could do better.
And I had this idea that instead of creating these neuroprosthetic devices to fix arm movements, I could create prosthetic devices that would target the mind and the soul.
Dzirasa got to work making science fiction reality. His neural interfaces record the brain's electrical signals over time, while other techniques simultaneously monitor behavior. His machine learning programs then pore over the mountains of data, identifying neural circuitry associated with symptoms. The work paves the way for a future in which brain-computer interfaces pinpoint a patient's depressive neural circuits in real time. Quick, life-saving relief could then come from designer drugs delivered directly to the problem areas. Dzirasa also envisions treatments that target and restore healthy electrical signals using pulses of infrared light that pass harmlessly through the skull. In the end, Dzirasa's work goes beyond depression, cutting straight to the heart of what it means to be human.
How does the brain work, and what is a thought, right? We wrestle with all of these deep questions about, like, what does consciousness mean if our thoughts are summed up by electricity? And what does it mean about the consciousness of other things that create and process electricity? I think beginning to answer those questions will unlock a lot about what it means to be human, but also give rise to potential new understandings and treatments for psychiatric disorders.
The recipient of the Benjamin Franklin Next Gen Award, Kafui Dzirasa. Thank you, Dr. Dzirasa. We'll keep that pointy thing safe for you until afterwards. Half of the Earth's oxygen is produced by microorganisms in the oceans. One of the most prolific is so small it had eluded oceanographers for decades. After the discovery of the smallest photosynthesizing organism on Earth, Sally Chisholm, who goes by Penny, would change the field of ecology in big ways.
Recently, I've taken up Tai Chi, which I really enjoy and has been very good for me. The meditative aspects of it, the pattern, the choreography, I learned a lot about the mind-body connection.
To oceanographer Penny Chisholm, the prospect of retirement seems unthinkable. She wonders what will come of the tiny sea creatures in her lab. Theirs is a scientific bond forged over decades, beginning at the ends of the Earth. In 1987, Chisholm boarded a ship bound for a remote region of the North Atlantic with a team of researchers and a $75,000 medical imaging device called a flow cytometer, the first time one had been assembled at sea. Designed to image individual cells in the body, one after another, its laser would let them see the diversity of phytoplankton, photosynthesizing microbes responsible for half the Earth's oxygen. When the team turned it on, they saw something small in the seawater, 100 times smaller than the width of a human hair. It had been slipping through filters undetected. It was alive, green.
They were smaller than anything anybody thought existed as a photosynthetic cell.
The team had discovered the smallest and most abundant photosynthesizing single-celled organism on Earth, a phytoplankton tinier than all others. They called it Prochlorococcus, meaning green berry, and with it, Chisholm would chart a new course for oceanography. The compact size made lab work maddening, but it also meant Chisholm could view the ocean's ecology from the smallest interactions to the global stage.
So that's what kept me sticking with Prochlorococcus, even though it was incredibly difficult in the beginning.
Prochlorococcus began to reveal ecological secrets. It stabilized entire marine ecosystems, thrived in warming oceans, and it was responsible for about 5% of Earth's oxygen. In a sense, you can thank Prochlorococcus for 1 out of every 20 breaths you take. The discoveries would turn ecology upside down.
Prochlorococcus leads the way. It tells us what to do.
And Prochlorococcus seemed primed for a world tour. Chisholm obliged. TV, exhibitions, it even stars in a series of children's books Chisholm wrote to kickstart ecology education. Chisholm believes its small size may even hold the secret to renewable energy.
It is the smallest genome, the smallest amount of information that can convert solar energy and carbon dioxide into organic carbon, which is fuel.
If Prochlorococcus's genetics can teach us how to do artificial photosynthesis, scientists could power the world with a new renewable biofuel. And with the ability to make carbohydrates from sunlight, we could produce food in regions unfit for farming. For now, Prochlorococcus still guides Chisholm's research, a constant on her journey through the great ebb and flow of life.
My Tai Chi teacher is actually a scientist. We talk about Chi a lot, even though we don't know what it is. At first, I was incredibly skeptical about the whole thing, but I now can feel it, whatever it is. So if you can feel it, it is. It doesn't matter what it is.
The recipient of the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Earth and Environmental Science, Sally W. Chisholm. We spend our lives making choices. With each new day, we face hundreds of decisions. It's tempting to think we approach them rationally, but Paul Slovic would caution otherwise. His world-class body of research shows that when human beings face decisions, we tend to fall short of reason.
Where risk enters the world stage, Paul Slovic follows. What began as a childhood obsession with Major League Basketball statistics led to a career of calculating risk. He's consulted for the EPA, FDA, the Department of Homeland Security.
And the Secret Service, after Ronald Reagan was shot in the 1980s, they became concerned about how to make decisions about the many threats on the president's life.
Slovic is a world leader in decision-making, and his work highlights a fatal flaw in the way we all make choices. In the 1970s, theories of the global economy rested on an assumption that when we make decisions, we rationally choose what benefits us most. Seems sensible enough. But common sense was being turned on its head at a psychology lab in Eugene, Oregon, where Slovic had created a mock casino game. His gamblers were choosing a big payoff over terrible odds, betting bigger as the pot grew and odds fell. But when Slovic added a second possible wager, a small payoff with good odds, gamblers reversed, suddenly favoring odds over a big jackpot.
That was shocking to economists because it showed that preferences weren't stable and consistent.
Slovic upended economics, revealing that we make choices irrationally. We decide what's best for us by how the choice is presented. Slovic says it's a quirk of evolution. Our brains evolved in a simpler time. Critical thought took time and energy in this survival-oriented world, so our emotions, which deal in context, stepped in. Quick and reactive in sizing up a given situation, they let us make many decisions in a day. But today, there's a dark side to what was once an evolutionary advantage, especially when big numbers are involved. Whether dollars or human lives, our emotions can't handle the math.
If there's one life at risk, it's very important for us to, protect that life or rescue that person.
So 20, 100, or 1 million lives at risk should make us that much more concerned, right? It doesn't. In fact, Slovic's research shows the opposite is true. Take his study on genocides like Rwanda in the 90s.
800,000 people were killed in a period of 100 days, and the world was tipped off in advance that it was going to happen.
Even with troops on the ground begging to intervene, the UN didn't, though the security risk was small. Slovic's research shows that the unfathomable number of lives in jeopardy helped deter assistance. And if you're skeptical, consider this. Slovic set up an experiment inviting people to support a starving child pictured in an advertisement. People donated, but then he added numbers to the flyer.
Next to her face, we put the statistics of the fact that there were millions of people starving in her region, and we thought that would boost the donations. It had the opposite effect. The donations dropped in half.
Stunning revelations like this underlie an uncomfortable refrain in Slovic's research. When numbers grow, our brains simply can't process the scale. We become numb.
There's no reason that life should become less important just because other people are also at risk.
But that's how we operate. Slovic's research scientifically implicates irrational decision-making in how we respond to the grim projections of climate change with inaction, and how during the pandemic, preventative measures fall off as the death toll rises. The good news is, we're not powerless to curb the effects. Awareness is the cure. Slovic has committed his life to spreading it.
We have to deal with these things, and it starts with decisions. It involves recognizing that our feelings are useful, but we also have to temper those feelings with logic and reason and pay attention to scientific thinking and other careful analysis, as well as how we feel about things.
The recipient of the Bauer Award and Prize for Achievement in Science, Paul Slovic. And now, the President and CEO of the Franklin Institute, Larry Dubinsky.
Thank you, Derek. It is wonderful to see so many friends here in this room tonight. The past 2 years have been some of the most challenging in the Institute's history, and philanthropy has truly been the saving grace. Thank you for all you have done to sustain this important institution. In the face of a crisis unlike any we could have imagined, science led the way. And the Institute is proud of the part we play and inspiring a passion for learning about science and technology. I'd be remiss not to take a moment to recognize the Institute's Board of Trustees, whose steadfast counsel and incredible generosity are unparalleled. The board has been chaired by Don Morell, whose leadership, guidance, and support has truly been remarkable. I also want to thank Chair Emerita Marcia Perlman and Board Vice Chair Tom Lynch, who joined Don in understanding the profound impact of months of closures and loss of revenue, and swiftly came to the Institute's aid with extraordinary philanthropy and support. Don, Marcia, and Tom, I am beyond grateful. The pandemic forced us to cancel awards in 2020 and shift last year's ceremony online. But thanks to our sponsors, supporters, and the leadership of Mimi Greenlee and Chris Franklin, those 2 years generated meaningful support for the Institute. Mimi and Chris, thank you for doing double duty. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. Like the Institute, our presenting sponsor, Bank of America, has a long history of working across Philadelphia and the country to help people realize their dreams. Bank of America is a leader, investing in our community to ensure all Philadelphians are set up for success. From promoting mobility through job initiatives to improving racial equity, it is impressive how supportive they've been of this community and of the Franklin Institute. The bank continues to look at new ways to meet the needs of this region and create lasting change. The Institute salutes Bank of America for an incredible 20-year partnership as the presenting sponsor for this event, and recognizes Greater Philadelphia President Jim Dever, Managing Director and Franklin Institute Trustee Rob McMiniman, and Senior Vice President Debbie O'Brien for their tireless support. Thank you. There are so many individuals who are involved in bringing this event to life. I want to acknowledge the efforts of the 2022 Friends Committee and Awards Corporate Committee, led by chairs Melissa Tralla and Mike Inocenzo, and their vice chairs, Heather Bittenbender and Greg Devins. Their leadership has been critical in ensuring the success of tonight's event. Thank you so much. And finally, my thanks to all of you again for your generous support. I'm thrilled to share with you what your partnership makes possible, not just tonight, but 365 days a year. The Institute is both the most visited museum in Pennsylvania and a national leader in developing and implementing models for STEM education. We welcome nearly 1 million visitors to our Science Center annually, and we reach beyond our walls to serve communities throughout the region and nationally. Every day, the Institute offers new and exciting access to science and technology that would dazzle and delight our namesake. Welcoming 200,000 students each year for field trips that spark curiosity and encourage young people to explore STEM careers. Training educators across the nation who work in libraries, community centers, and out-of-school time organizations to better reach and inspire young people within their communities. Launching a new digital platform to connect the curious-minded everywhere through podcasts and video series. Investing in middle and high school students through intensive, multi-year programs that ignite interest in science, build knowledge, and prepare them for college and other training programs. Delivering trusted science communication and resources to foster a science-literate community. And now that science has helped us to emerge from a worldwide pandemic, the Franklin Institute is once again returning to the important work of transforming our Science Center. we're thinking big. We're revolutionizing the way we inspire and educate. The Institute's master plan will deliver an immersive, future-focused experience that will be fun, engaging, and educational, helping people of all ages to appreciate the impact of science and even inspire the child who might one day stand on this stage as a Franklin Institute laureate. Thank you for being here tonight to support the Institute's work to change lives and improve futures by inspiring a passion for science and technology.
Thank you, Larry. I couldn't agree more. When the Franklin Institute sparks within its young visitors an interest in science, we just do not know whether that flicker will explode into a brilliant flame that transforms the world and our lives. And now, our next 5 laureates who have illuminated our understanding of the universe. From LEDs to computer chips, the discovery of semiconductors gave rise to modern electronics. But it was Russell Dupuy, Daniel Dapkus, and a groundbreaking manufacturing technology that put them into our homes and our pockets, unleashing innovation around the globe.
The turn of the 20th century, landline telephones, incandescent lights. This is the Western world around the time the first semiconductor device was patented. Unrivaled progress in electrical engineering followed, a new technological revolution confined to institutional settings by the high cost of making semiconductors. More than 70 years would pass before Russell Dupuy, Daniel Dapkus, and a disruptive new manufacturing method would open the floodgates, unleashing the most advanced electronic technologies across the globe, changing it and us for good. One grew up on acres of wheat, the other in the Chicago hustle.
We didn't have a lot of advanced electronic projects on the farm. Of course, the space race was going on.
And I thought for a while that, boy, it'd be wonderful to be an astronaut. As time progressed, I realized that they were sending pilots up there, and I wasn't a pilot.
When Dupuy and Dapkus met in the lab of Franklin Institute medalist Nick Holonyak at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, they owed their friendship to a technological revolution from outer space: semiconductors.
Things like silicon and gallium came out of star explosions and ended up here, stuck in this dirt somewhere.
And in Holonyak's lab, the two saw how the different types of semiconducting stardust could be combined to make groundbreaking new lasers and LEDs, technology with the potential to launch a new era of global communications. And yet, the building blocks could only be assembled under lab conditions. Mass production was impossible. As the years passed, Dupuy found potential in an idea from late chemist Hal Manisevic, a machine that would blast the ingredients into something of a high-tech snow globe and build devices layer by layer as the snowflakes settled.
I started building my first reactor in July of 1975.
Dupuy was working at Rockwell Labs, where Dapkus would join him in developing MOCVD.
Most of the people I talked to said, "You're wasting your time. That technique will never work."
But the reactor worked perfectly, liberating years of innovation that had been confined to the lab.
We made electrically operated lasers, and it turns out that these lasers were better than what anybody else had made before.
Suddenly, the millions of lasers needed to build the world's communications networks could be mass-produced. Millions of miles of fiber optic cables gave life to the internet.
So now we can Google Lady Gaga and see what she's up to on any particular day of the week.
And you can do it from your smartphone because the parts that connect mobile devices to cell towers are made with MOCVD. The process is shrinking the power accessories for your devices, making energy grids more efficient, and powering spacecraft with advanced solar cells.
All of the cells that SpaceX is putting up are cells made this way. So his 20,000 near-Earth satellites for telecom are going to be all based on this technology for power.
The snow globe technique unleashed affordable LED technology. Because of LEDs alone, forecasts predict a 40% cut in U.S. energy usage by 2030. As MOCVD evolves, a new world emerges. Brighter, greener, smarter, and more connected than ever.
Recipients of the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Electrical Engineering, P. Daniel Dapkus and Russell D. Dupuy. Sheldon Weinbaum is a self-described mystery solver who unravels the enigmas of human biology. Few bioengineers have made such lasting contributions to the field of physiology. Fewer still have worked so tirelessly to make science more equitable.
Another great mystery of physiology, another sudden hunch. Sheldon Weinbaum is a detective of biomechanics who has solved some of the biggest mysteries in physiology, but his first case might have been his most important one. It was summer 1960, and 23-year-old Weinbaum had come south from Harvard to Philadelphia, searching for a woman in blue.
I saw her in a fleeting, maybe 15 seconds, and I decided I have to meet this person.
He looked her up in the phone book. Her name was Sandy Wolkowitz, and she would change Weinbaum's life. By the 60s, they were married. At the height of the Cold War, Weinbaum was a rising star in Harvard's engineering program. His models of missile trajectories brought in government grants, and thousands gathered, eager to hear his talks. Meanwhile, Sandy was fighting for civil rights.
She went on a bus with her closest friend from a black church, and they went to hear the famous talk of Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech, and I was not on that bus. It's one of the things that I have most regretted. My wife basically has changed the way I look at the world.
Weinbaum followed Sandy into a generation's fight for peace and equality. He returned his U.S. government weapons grants and took a professorship at the City College of New York in Harlem, where he spearheaded a new era of diversity.
And I had a program with 25 minority students a year. The total number in the United States of PhDs produced by minority students at that time could have been between 30 and 40.
And he began to apply his engineering skills to the mysteries of the body.
I get a call from the Cardiovascular Research Foundation to come down, and they have a mystery for me.
By this time, Weinbaum had already solved the very challenging and controversial problem on how heat in blood flow moves between arteries, veins, and capillaries in the body, how bones sense pressure, how the kidneys sense fluid. This new mystery had to do with vulnerable plaques in the arteries. When they burst, they cause the fatal blood clots that account for 50% of cardiovascular deaths in the US. Doctors couldn't explain how they were rupturing. A hunch hit Weinbaum out of the blue.
And then I got a crazy idea. Back in the 1920s, when they were first making rubber tires, they would explode. And they found out that what was causing it was that there were solid impurities in the rubber.
Over time, these deposits weakened the rubber around them. The same had to be true in the arteries. Special imaging machines proved him right. The almost invisible calcifications were exactly where Weinbaum said they'd be. The discovery is laying groundwork for life-saving imaging tests that may one day let doctors identify patients at risk for certain types of heart attacks and strokes. Weinbaum's push for equality never let up. He recruited women from around the world into science and influenced the changing demographics of membership in the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And he famously won a landmark 1992 lawsuit against the state of New York for discriminatory funding practices in education. Weinbaum credits it all to Sandy.
So that's how we met. But the other part of it, my father was very ill in the hospital at that time. He died about 10 days later, and Sandy has never met my father. But I told him the day before he died that I had met the woman who I thought I would marry. That is the story.
the recipient of the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Bioengineering, Sheldon Weinbaum. Wrench in hand, Carol Robinson grew up fixing the family cars. I could use a little bit of that help, please. Today, the tiny engine she disassembles in her Oxford lab are much more compact, with parts 100,000 times smaller than the head of a pin.
Life is founded on astonishing complexity. Inside a human cell, biology seems to border on the incredible. Knowing how the parts fit together helps doctors and drug makers save lives. Yet pictures of such infinitesimal events elude our microscopes. But Dame Carol Robinson sees a different way to behold this delicate masterpiece of natural engineering. Vaporize it.
I had a very inexpensive car which was always breaking down, so I was always trying to fix it. And in those days you could take off the top of the engine and fiddle around and try to tune it and try to make it better.
In the south of England in the 1960s, Robinson leaves behind a life of academics, which heads her off at every turn. She chooses to leave school at just 16 years old, but takes a lab technician job at Pfizer, where she proves a natural talent with a novel chemical analysis machine called a mass spectrometer. She returns to school at night and on weekends, earning her undergraduate degrees, then her doctorate from Cambridge in record time. Next, she opts to step back for 8 years to raise her 3 children. But in 1991, the mass spectrometer came calling again.
I took my children to the library, as I often did, and I happened to see an advert for a mass spectrometrist. I used to be that person, and it was at Oxford, and I thought, well, I'll have a go.
In a very loose sense, mass spectrometry is for chemists what pyrotechnics are for people who like entertaining explosions, which, let's admit it, is practically everyone. Chemists load these machines with material samples, blast them with energy, and marvel at the glittering vaporized aftermath, which can reveal important information about the molecular components.
It's almost like the hairs on the back of your neck are tingling and you're so excited and just want to dance.
A childhood exploring the outdoors had made Robinson fascinated with biology. Now she wanted to see the complexities of life unfold on the most fundamental levels, to watch the components working together. At one time, doing this with mass spectrometry was a little like rigging this 1992 Ford Escort with explosives to learn about the inside of its engine. There had been progress since, but Robinson was about to change everything.
There's been articles written saying, you know, Robinson attempts to do this, it's not a good idea, etc., etc. And I've always just thought, right, well, I'm going to show you this is going to work. I find that quite motivating.
Robinson learned how to control the vaporizing action of the mass spectrometer, developing groundbreaking techniques that can remove the machinery of the cell intact, preserving the function of its components. Her work revealed complexities that had been impossible to see, giving medical researchers profound insight into processes that cause disease. She's pioneered methods that uncover how drugs bind to the surfaces of cells, which could lead to new advanced pharmaceuticals. All the while, Robinson, who left academics twice, became the first female professor of chemistry at the University of Cambridge. And in 2013, a royal recognition of her work made Robinson a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire.
I love what I do. I find it engrossing, captivating. I still find it fascinating, you know, years later, since my first spectra. I look at the spectra that my students get and I'm just, oh, that's so beautiful. You know, I think there's a beauty in it that, you know, only a few people see, but, you know, I still think it's there.
There we go. The recipient of the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Chemistry, Carol V. Robinson. NASA's Voyager spacecraft are great triumphs of science, engineering, and the human spirit of exploration, having flown farther than any machines in history. And for more than 4 decades after soaring into space, they're still probing the vast distances between the stars, still delivering useful scientific data. Thanks to Ed Stone.
In 1977, 2 spacecraft left Earth on the greatest journey ever undertaken, to visit the giants that orbit at the far reaches of our solar system, with Voyager 2 soaring beyond Neptune in 1989, having covered roughly 4 billion miles. But in a sense, for the mission's chief scientist Ed Stone, the journey had just begun. The craft had a ways to cover yet, searching for an unknown border, the boundary between the sun and interstellar space. When Ed Stone listened to a NASA briefing in 1972, the world was vastly different than the one he'd known growing up in Burlington, Iowa on the Mississippi River.
When I was a youngster in school, there was no space age.
That changed in 1957 with Sputnik, and Stone, with a newly minted doctorate in physics from the University of Chicago, would soon join NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory to explore the new frontier of space. The 1972 meeting was about a coming alignment of planets. A spacecraft launched in exactly 5 years could visit Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, all in just over a decade.
That's what I was made the project scientist, or chief scientist of the mission.
Stone and NASA set out to invent new instruments and spacecraft capable of visiting new worlds and finding a boundary that no one could pinpoint. Exploding stars fill the galaxy with deadly radiation. Earth would be sailing through it all if not for the sun. Like a blast furnace, its wind creates a shield. Where the bubble ends, interstellar space begins. And if we ever want to send people or robots to another star, we need to know where the boundary is and how much radiation is out there. Stone outfitted Voyager with a radiation detector.
I don't remember the number exactly, but as I recall, we had about 4,000 bits of its program memory.
In 1977, the farthest journey ever undertaken would launch with just a fraction of the computer memory we'd use nowadays to store a one-page document. Voyager 1 and 2 sped across the solar system, visiting awe-inspiring worlds. Even as Voyager 2 left the planets behind, Stone's radiation instrument showed no sign of interstellar space. The spacecraft hurtled on across the solar system at 35,000 miles per hour. The decades passed, and Stone moved on, directing JPL through the first Mars rover missions, Cassini, and other milestones in space exploration before stepping down in 2001.
Well, I think as humans, we really have always been pressing the frontiers.
In August 2012, Voyager 1 was 11 billion miles from the sun, farther than any machine in history had flown. The signals that Mission Control had been monitoring for decades suddenly showed dramatic changes in radiation levels, indicating that Voyager was approaching the boundary it had been seeking. 5 years later, Voyager 2 followed suit. Stone was 82 then. Listening to spacecraft he'd launched 40 years prior signaled back that they'd both finally reached their destination, 4 times more distant than Neptune. Interstellar space.
You learn by observing and calculating, and each time you do, you find that nature's even more powerful than you could imagine.
And today, 2 of humanity's greatest achievements continue to cross vast leagues of emptiness, still collecting data, breaking records with every new mile covered, and mapping space between the stars.
Accepting the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Physics on behalf of Edward C. Stone, his daughter, Janet Stone. It's now my pleasure to introduce a longtime passionate supporter of the awards program, Dr. Donald Morell, Chair of the Institute's Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Derek, and good evening, everyone. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see you all in Franklin Hall again this evening. Tonight, under Ben's gaze, we have the opportunity to identify and honor the 198th Class of Franklin Laureates, whose contributions to science and technology have fundamentally changed our understanding of the world. And for those of you that are doing the math, the Nobels are 75 years behind. The awards program is made possible by the dedicated individuals that comprise the committees that identify, vet, and select the laureates. The Committee on the Science and the Arts, chaired by Dr. Donald Silberberg of the University of Pennsylvania. The International Selection Committee for the Bauer Award for Achievement in Science, chaired by Dr. Paul Offit of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And the Bauer Award for Business Leadership, chaired by Professor Michael Useem of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. Please join me in recognizing the chairs and their colleagues for preserving and advancing the awards program. You've heard several times this evening that our mission here at the Franklin Institute is to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology to honor the legacy of Ben Franklin, and to do this in audiences of all ages, but most importantly, to instill a sense of curiosity in our youngest visitors. In short, the function of the Institute is to advocate for science for a better world. The emergence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus at the beginning of 2020 provides a stark and powerful example of how collaboration between academic science, government policy, and the power of private industry, when focused on a single goal, can produce remarkable results. But this does not happen in a vacuum. Leadership is paramount. When the Committee for the Bauer Award for Business Leadership convened in the spring of 2021, the decision was unanimously made to break with our tradition and to recognize the leadership of 3 remarkable individuals and their respective companies for their efforts to combat the SARS pandemic. These efforts built on years of scientific research by thousands of individuals, 2 of whom we honor this evening. From the sequencing of the viral genome in the early part of 2020 until the first vaccinations were given in less than a year, the world witnessed the power of science to benefit humanity. Tens of thousands of scientists, engineers, clinicians, data specialists, and most importantly, those who volunteered for the clinical trials, did what many thought was impossible. The development, testing, large-scale manufacture, and distribution of not 1, but 3 remarkably safe and effective vaccines. And in doing so, unleashed the most powerful force in nature, hope. There is no better person to put into perspective or context what was accomplished than my fellow trustee and colleague, Dr. Paul Offit.
At the end of 2019, a virus called SARS-CoV-2 raised its head in Wuhan, China, and started to kill people, primarily with pneumonia. The disease was called COVID, and then it started to sweep across Asia, across Europe, and across the United States. In January 2020, that virus was isolated and sequenced. Only 11 months later, there were 2 vaccines, both made using a novel technology, messenger RNA, that had been tested in 2 large clinical trials by Pfizer and Moderna. 2 months later, there was another vaccine made by Johnson & Johnson using another novel technology called vector virus technology that again showed that these vaccines were remarkably safe and remarkably effective. And the scientists and researchers and clinicians who were involved in this all had this remarkable level of cooperation that enabled something to happen that no one thought could happen. If you asked 1,000 scientists in the beginning of January 2020, when we first isolated and sequenced this virus, do you think we could have a vaccine within 11 months that is safe and effective? I don't think you would have found one that would have said yes. I was fortunate enough to be part of a team at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that created a rotavirus vaccine, a vaccine that was licensed and recommended for all children in this country in 2006, and that was recommended for all children in the world by the World Health Organization in 2013. That was a 26-year effort. It took 26 years to develop that vaccine. When you consider what it takes really to make a vaccine, in terms of all the science that has to go behind it, and then all the clinical work that has to go behind it, the fact that we only isolated this virus by January of 2020 and had a vaccine 11 months later is like trying to imagine a fourth dimension or a fifth dimension. It's just frankly unimaginable, even though it happened. This is a story of a triumph between science and industry, and these are some of the heroes.
I'm in an infectious disease division, and I actually had friends at the Wuhan Institute, and I called them up and asked them what's going on. And they said, there's a new pneumonia going around, and it's worse than what the Chinese government is saying.
I just came home for my husband's birthday in March 13. We arrived to the airport, it was empty because that night the US was closed down.
We all remember the moment the COVID-19 pandemic became real for us. It came out of nowhere, followed by dire headlines, lockdowns, a global health tragedy unfolding on scales unseen in over a century, and a breakthrough that seemed to appear the very moment it was needed. But for biochemist Catalin Carrico and infectious disease expert Drew Weissman, it had taken 25 years of bioengineering.
I had a full head of hair when I started, so.
No, that's not true.
Before the spotlight fell on mRNA vaccines. In 1996, Weissman joined the University of Pennsylvania's Department of Medicine, where Carrico had worked for 10 years. By then, she'd moved on, switched departments. Their paths might not have crossed at all.
Maybe I was keep coming back because I know the password for the Xerox machine, something like that.
It was while making photocopies that Carrico learned Weissman was searching for an HIV vaccine. She just happened to be an expert in the very stuff he wanted to use, mRNA. Typical vaccines work by showing the immune system a protein fragment of a virus, like the spike protein you may have seen in the news. The immune system analyzes the fragment and mounts a defense. But to make a vaccine with traditional methods, researchers have to learn the protein's shape and then manufacture it. This takes time, and viruses like HIV mutate too fast. mRNA is like a courier service to the protein factories in the body. Use mRNA to deliver the blueprints of a virus's protein signature, the pair figured, and the cells in the body would do the manufacturing for them.
So we are not created a new drug, we just borrowed from nature.
But nature is complex. Millions of years of evolution made mRNA resistant to the changes Carrico and Weissman needed to make if they were ever to coax it into delivering the protein blueprints they needed. Their attempts were causing dangerous inflammation. The cause lay hidden somewhere within the intricate interplay between the molecules that make up mRNA and a multitude of cellular sensors that trigger the immune system. The obstacles meant virtually no one supported their work, but the pair persisted.
Every new finding led to hundreds of more questions.
By 2014, a series of breakthroughs answered the last of those questions. They'd found the inflammation-causing receptors and learned how to circumvent them. After years of probing the infinite complexity of the immune system, an mRNA vaccine platform that was safe and with incredible potential.
It's almost unimaginable how many different vaccines can potentially be made. The evening before the paper came out, I said to Katie, tomorrow our phones are going to ring off the hook.
This was science that could possibly pave the way for vaccines against deadly allergies, cancers, and countless viruses. Vaccines that could be deployed quicker than ever.
And the next day, the phone didn't ring. The next week, the next month, the next year.
What should we do now?
They decided to press on, studying how mRNA could be developed as therapeutics for many types of diseases. And suddenly, the phone did ring, and it rang in a big way.
We hadn't been subjected to a pandemic in 100 years.
There was an announcement that there is a new virus coming out from Wuhan and other places.
Hospitals were being prepared in China that could handle thousands of patients.
With a global pandemic imminent, it became clear that the task of saving millions of lives would fall to drug makers.
I literally woke up in sweat one morning, and I'm like, oh, geez, it's a pandemic like 1918. And I totally changed my plan. I was supposed to go to Germany after Switzerland, and I bought a one-way ticket to Washington, D.C. to go meet with Dr. Fauci, to go to the FDA.
CEOs Albert Bourla of Pfizer, Alex Gorski of Johnson & Johnson, and Stéphane Bancel of Moderna found themselves answering a desperate call, a safe vaccine produced more quickly and in greater quantities than any before.
Every day is going to matter because a lot of people are going to die.
This was a must-not-fail moment.
January 2020. Drug makers and U.S. health agencies held emergency meetings in Washington. Discussions about a potential vaccine were two-pronged. It needed to be safe and effective, and it needed to come fast.
These kind of development programs can ordinarily take between 7 and 17 years.
In fact, until then, the fastest vaccine development in history concluded in 1967, with a vaccine for mumps taking just 4 years. But with COVID-19 mortality projections forecasting millions of deaths annually, the world couldn't afford to wait. In a twist of good fortune, some groundwork had been laid in recent years. For nearly a decade, Johnson & Johnson scientists had been working on an adenovirus-based platform in their efforts to develop vaccines for other infectious diseases like Ebola. And in 2016, Franklin Institute laureate Kizzmekia Corbett and her team at the NIH had learned how to make stable coronavirus spike proteins, fast-tracking the procurement of the virus fingerprint. And Carrico and Weissman's mRNA delivery platform had recently undergone 2 years of experimental testing, allowing Pfizer and Moderna to move forward with a solution that would cut manufacturing time.
On March 16, we injected the first human being with the vaccine.
In fewer than 100 days, clinical trials began, along with the nail-biting wait for results. In the meantime, Gorski, Bourla, and Bancel faced a second formidable challenge.
There were things that were going to keep you awake at night. One, there was the fundamental question of, could we have the chemistry, the biology that was going to show this vaccine to be safe and effective? Number two, could we produce it at scale? Did we have the engineering capacity?
For all three drug makers, the answer was a resounding no. The manufacturing infrastructure simply didn't exist anywhere worldwide.
In 2019, we had made for the entire year, for all the products, less than 100,000 doses.
The peak production that we had on an annual basis before the pandemic was 200 million doses across all our vaccines, across all our manufacturing sites in the world.
Consider the flu vaccine. The total number of doses produced yearly worldwide by all manufacturers hovers at around 500 million doses.
I discussed with my head of manufacturing, and I said, Juan, we need to make 1 billion doses next year.
3 billion doses within the first year, while there were no manufacturing facilities ready to do something like that.
But by March, an unprecedented collaboration of scientists, regulators, and logistics and distribution experts, supported by private and public funding, had come together to do the impossible.
These people are mothers and fathers, their brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, who poured their heart and soul, working 24/7 for months.
They believe that what's at stake is not their career, is not the success of the company, it is the safety, it is the survival of people that they love.
Meanwhile, ventilator shortages, heartbreaking farewells by cell phone, friends separated, families driven apart by the wedge of isolation, a rising death toll.
The world was watching literally every step that was being taken.
And collectively holding its breath, waiting for the results of the first clinical trials thanks to tens of thousands of volunteers. For Moderna, that call came in November.
The vaccine was 94% efficacious. Well, I remember it was on a Sunday. I literally left my home office when I heard it. I went to my wife and I started crying in her arms.
By early December, Pfizer was the first to receive emergency authorization from the FDA.
Don't ever think something is impossible before you try. You will be surprised.
By February 2021, all three companies had the FDA green light to move forward with vaccinations. The sweeping effort to invent manufacturing infrastructure had also succeeded. Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson began the largest vaccine distribution effort in history.
You had the trucks loading at the CDC and getting to get the vaccine distributed in the US.
Seeing those actual containers being shipped from our warehouses and being right here in New Jersey with the governor, seeing the first shots being administered in patients' arms were all moments that I'll never forget.
I still remember the day that 92 years old women in UK, dressed in festive holiday clothes, received the first vaccine in the world for COVID. That was our vaccine. And on her way out, in a wheelchair, the personnel of the hospital were giving her a standing ovation.
And after a year of lockdowns and heartbreak, hope.
In the other room, they already injected the vaccine to the healthcare workers, and that was very emotional. And then we were sitting with Drew waiting for the injection, and I was just thinking about all of the work we have done together.
Yeah, I mean, it was 25 years of work being stuck in my arm. It was a fantastic feeling.
The record-setting vaccine response by the 3 U.S. drug makers and others is helping to protect people around the globe, 4.4 billion and counting, from death and serious disease, paving the way for schools and businesses to open, for protecting healthcare workers at the front line, and for families, friends, and communities to finally come together again.
The recipients of the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Life Science, Catalin Carico and Drew Weissman. And the recipients of the Bauer Award for Business Leadership, Stefan Bancel, Albert Borla, and Alex Gorski. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating the 2022 Franklin Institute Laureates.